Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand and share this time with the Honourable Member for Prince George and Chaco. Mr. Speaker, thousands of Canadian forestry jobs depend on a strong agreement that protects Canadians' access to the U.S. market for our softwood lumber. The $65 billion a year forest product industry represents about 2% of Canada's gross domestic product and is one of the country's largest employers. The forest sector provides good paying jobs to over 230 cities and towns across Canada. The industry employs 230,000 Canadians, mostly in communities that need them the most, in northern and rural Canada. Now that the one-year standstill period has expired, hefty U.S. duties could be slapped on Canadian exports to the United States by early 2017. This failure to agree probably means a costly and frustrating new season ahead for Canadian timber companies, which can expect to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the U.S. government in order to keep shipping their products south of the Canadian-U.S. border, Mr. Speaker. Forest Product Association of Canada members include the largest manufacturers of forest products in Canada, present in communities across the country, such as Miller Western Forest Products, West Fraser, Weyerhaeuser, which are all located in my riding of Yellowhead, Mr. Speaker. This forest industry provides local jobs for thousands within my riding. In fact, local mayors have been clear. Failure to reach a fair and balanced softwood agreement would have huge negative impacts on the Yellowhead region. In Alberta, the forest industry employs over 19,000 people, the majority of which are in my riding. My constituents and the forest industry deserves to know what their future will be. Mayor Glenn McLean of Drayton Valley stated, in order for Drayton Valley's forest product industry to remain strong, we require a fair and balanced agreement on softwood lumber. Hundreds of local jobs depend on a sound trading relationship with the U.S. Mayor Rob Mackin of Hinton stated, forestry is vital to our region, provides jobs for hundreds in Hinton alone. Because this is a priority issue, finding a successful resolution on the softwood lumber agreement is crucial to the sustainability of the industry and our communities. And Mayor Greg Pashney of Edson, where I live, forestry has been and remains a vital part of our regional economy. It has kept a significant portion of our community employed with high-quality jobs. Failure to reach an appropriate softwood lumber agreement would have a huge negative impact on our community. In 2014, 66% of Canadian softwood exports were shipped to the U.S. Today, 96% of all softwood lumber imports into the United States are from Canada. Today, Canada holds about 20% of the U.S. market. The 2006 softwood lumber agreement capped the Canadian share at 34%. We've never reached that number, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and the Minister of International Trade promised 400,000 Canadian forestry workers a framework agreement on softwood lumber exports with the Obama administration by mid-June of 2016. Hasn't happened. With the government's failure to meet the June deadline and October 12th deadline of the last trade agreement, it is imperative that this Liberal government take all necessary steps to prevent a trade war that will threaten the livelihood of Canadian workers and communities. This will be war number 5, Mr. Speaker. This year, the Liberal members of the House of Commons International Trade Committee voted against our Conservative motion to have the Minister of International Trade convene a round table to determine a national agenda for softwood lumber negotiations. Negotiating a new softwood lumber agreement has never been a priority for this government. It was not included in the minister's mandate letter or in the speech from the throne. And now, after a year in office, they have failed to get it done. This government has now missed the deadline for a new softwood lumber agreement. Whether it is failing to find a solution to the softwood lumber dispute or creating more uncertainty for pipeline development, Liberal policies are stifling the private sector investment that creates jobs for hard-working Canadian families. Mr. Speaker, the Softwood lumber agreement expired on October 12th. The Liberal government has failed to create jobs and to grow the economy, and have now failed forestry workers and their families. As recently as June, U.S. timber interests were demanding that Canada agree to limit softwood lumber shipments such that the Canadian share of the U.S. lumber consumption is capped at 25%. That's down almost 10% from where it was. This is lower than Canada's 2015 market share of 30% and well below the 34% level reached before the two countries signed their last agreement in 2006. Richard Garneau, the U.S. trade representative, said in a recent interview that Canada has traditionally accounted for about 1/3 of the U.S. lumber market. But we're hearing rumors through our sources that the U.S. wants to gradually reduce this to 22%. The temporary accord negotiated by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper bridged this disagreement by agreeing that duties would be imposed on U.S.-bound softwood lumber when prices fell below a certain level and set a mechanism for managing disputes. The industry is no longer has this predictability and stability. The previous Conservative government provided with the 2006 Softwood Agreement an extension. We're now open for another war. The U.S. Lumber Coalition has indicated they are exploring their options to launch trade action against Canadian lumber, which cost the Canadian industry over $5 billion during the last dispute. And I must mention, 15,000 jobs in British Columbia alone. That is why the Conservative opposition created a softwood lumber task force today to hold this Liberal government accountable for solving the softwood lumber trade dispute with the United States. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian forest workers deserve stability and predictability from their government. After promising a deal by 100 days after the Prime Minister's trip to Washington in February, the Liberals were unwilling to put in the hard work to actually deliver on their promise. Saying that it was a tough deal to negotiate is a poor excuse to offer to the families who will lose their livelihoods. Instead of bringing Canadian industry together to develop a common position in these negotiations, the Liberals have pitted one region against another. I'm proud to be a member of the Conservative Softwood Lumber Task Force. I will continue to reach out to forest companies, workers, and municipal leaders in an area where forestry is the primary economic driver, and will reach out to other stakeholders from coast to coast to coast to solicit their recommendations for a solution. An agreement should stabilize the forest sector in every region of Canada, and that is why we launched the task force in order to petition those affected for their recommendations. Mr. Speaker, the forestry sector generates approximately 370 direct and indirect jobs in Canada. Usually round that off to 400,000, probably closer. It was our Conservative government that negotiated an extension of the deal in 2012 to ensure market stability through to October 2016. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Alberta is hurting. We now have some of the highest job rates in the country. The downturn in Alberta's energy sector has spilled into other parts of the economy. An unemployment rate is above 8% for the first time since the early 1990s. Canadian softwood lumber executives met recently with American trade ambassador as they brace for the prospects of U.S. tariffs that they think could result in mill closures and layoffs. Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that all stakeholders come together for the good of industry, the economy, and for all hardworking Canadians affected by the forest industry. And just speaking on a personal note, in my riding alone, 8 of my communities will be directly affected by this trade deal that is not signed and signed as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question et commentaire. Alors, la députée d'Avignon, la Matisse ce matin, Matapédia.
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais remercier notre collègue pour, évidemment, l'ensemble de son discours. Cependant, je suis étonné, évidemment, par l'ensemble des critiques qu'il formule à l'endroit de notre gouvernement, des critiques qu'il formule au secrétaire parlementaire, à mon collègue secrétaire parlementaire et à la ministre. Avec l'ensemble du travail que nos collègues ont fait en négociation au cours des dernières semaines, des derniers mois, un travail constant, un travail engagé avec les négociateurs américains, avec l'industrie, donc qui travaillent sans relâche pour être en mesure de mettre en place une entente. Si ça avait été si important pour les conservateurs, ma question pour mon collègue, c'est pourquoi est-ce qu'ils ont laissé expirer l'entente sur le bois d'œuvre sans avoir initié des négociations en bonne et due forme avec les Américains?
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member across well knows that the agreement expired during the past election. We had started in talks with the U.S. government, and it was left to the current government, which had over a year to solve the Softwood lumber agreement. Unfortunately, any agreements that would have taken, or any talks that would have taken during the election would have resulted in complaints from both sides, the Liberals and the NDP, if we had had talks during the election. That was impossible to do, Mr. Speaker.
Comments? Question et commentaire? The honourable member, la députée de Salaberry, Suroy.
Merci, M. le Président. Et, malgré le fait que je trouve que la motion d'opposition est très importante aujourd'hui, il faut quand même se souvenir que les ententes qui ont été négociées par les conservateurs en 2006 puis en 2012 ont fait en sorte que les industries forestières ont dû payer fort le prix, étant donné que les entreprises ont dû, le secteur canadien a dû créer un système qui leur a coûté 50 millions de dollars, puis qui a permis quand même aux États-Unis d'intenter des poursuites contre le Canada, ce qui a créé des pertes de 1 milliard de dollars en 2012. Évidemment, il faut qu'on ait un plan B parce qu'on est en train de rentrer encore dans un autre conflit sur le bois d'œuvre qui va coûter encore des emplois, puis probablement beaucoup de sous à nos entreprises. Puis dans la Montérégie, il y a au-dessus de 4 000 emplois dans le secteur forestier. Alors, est-ce que les conservateurs pensent qu'il faut quand même qu'on ait un plan B pour pouvoir soutenir nos entrepreneurs et les emplois chez nous?
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative caucus believes that we must get the best deal, it must be a good deal, and it must be a fair deal for the Canadian forest industry, forest workers. There may be sub-parts to that, but that is up to the group that are negotiating with the U.S. government. Again, I repeat, it must be the best deal we can get, it must be a good deal, and it must be fair for all regions of Canada. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Bow River.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the colleague from Yellowhead. You mentioned a little bit about communities, but you talked in broader terms. Could you possibly give us some details of what this would mean in the communities in your riding?
Honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you to the honourable member from Bow Valley. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, 8 communities will be directly affected by this agreement if it's not signed as quickly as possibly can, and again, done in the best way we can, make sure it's good and make sure it's fair. 8 communities from small hamlets to larger communities such as Hinton and Edson, Drayton Valley, but so many small independent contractors located across the Yellowhead, located across British Columbia, Quebec, all parts of Canada. It's the small family-run operations that are also going to be directly affected. So we must make sure that we get this agreement signed and signed in the best way we can. Thank you.